There is a specific kind of fury that does not announce itself. It does not come with a public meltdown or a midnight tweet storm or a press release disguised as a personal statement. It lives in court filings and custody threats and cryptic Instagram captions about focusing on who you are becoming. And right now, that fury belongs to Jeezy, a man watching the woman he left, Jeannie Mai, build a life so full and so visibly happy that it is cracking something in him he clearly was not prepared for.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna write my list
Yeah.
and I'm gonna forgive,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna forget.
But see, I'm looking in your eyes and I'm not really buying that.
I'm gonna forgive, but I'm not gonna forget.
Here is the part nobody wants to say plainly. Jeezy filed for divorce. He is the one who hired the attorney, signed the paperwork, and set the ending in motion while Jeannie was still showing up for that marriage with everything she had. He emotionally checked out long before the documents were served. He made the choice on his timeline without warning her. And now that Jeannie has taken that same energy and poured it into a new chapter, one she is describing as the most fulfilling love story of her life, Jeezy is furious. Not publicly, not loudly, but the behavior tells the full story. And when you lay every decision he has made since the divorce against the timeline of her healing, the picture that emerges is of a man who cannot tolerate watching the woman he discarded be happy without him. That is the story. Not the divorce, not the drama. The specific, undeniable reality of a man who cannot tolerate watching the woman he discarded be happy without him. Understanding why this particular fury runs so deep requires going all the way back to who Jeannie Mai was before he found her and what she gave up to be with him. Because the fury only makes sense when you understand the full weight of what she offered, what he took, and what he apparently expected her to do with the wreckage after he walked away. Jeannie Mai was not a woman who trusted easily. That is not a characterization imposed on her from outside. It is the story she told publicly, repeatedly, on national television, to millions of viewers who watched her work through it in real time. After her first marriage to Freddie Hartes ended in betrayal, he cheated, got another woman pregnant almost immediately after their split, and walked away from a relationship Jeannie thought was her forever. She rebuilt herself around a set of promises she made to her own heart. She was done with marriage, done with the risk, done with handing someone else that kind of power over her stability. She said she did not want children. She said she had seen too much to trust the foundation that children require. She built her career, her platform, her identity around a version of herself that was healed, whole, and deliberately self-protected. She was not hiding from love. She was honoring the lessons she had learned about what happens when you love someone who is not as invested in the relationship as you are. Then Jeezy walked in. They met through The Real, the daytime talk show that was Jeannie's professional home for years. A guest booking that turned into something neither of them apparently anticipated. He was calm, measured. He spoke in the language of men who have been through their storms and come out reflective. Accountability, healing, faith, purpose. He was the reformed version of himself, the chapter after the trap star and the legal troubles and the years of music that celebrated a life he was publicly claiming to have transcended. Their first date lasted 8 hours. Dinner turned into dancing. Conversation turned into the kind of vulnerability that Jeannie had not allowed herself in years. She said she could see forever with him before the night was over. That is not a small thing from a woman who had spent years insisting she did not want forever with anyone. She fell, harder and faster than she expected. And when he proposed less than 2 years after that first date, she said yes, which meant she had broken 2 of the most fundamental promises she had made to herself. She was getting married again. She was going to have a child. For a man who, she believed, represented everything she had been waiting for after the wreckage of her first marriage. The world loved them for it. Fans called it grown love, healed love. The relationship that proved second chances were real. Jeannie glowed in every interview. Jeezy played the part of the devoted partner with what appeared to be effortless sincerity. He talked about her as his peace. He talked about learning what it meant to love someone completely. He talked about God and alignment and the specific grace of finding the right person after you have done the internal work that makes receiving them possible. In 2021, Jeannie said something that became one of the defining quotes of their public relationship. She said, Jeezy made her realize she had never really felt safe in her life. That one line landed like a gift for every person watching. It told them that whatever had been broken in her, the first marriage, the years of self-protective isolation, the walls she had built around the most tender parts of herself, had been healed by this man. That she had found what she had been working toward. Their daughter, Monaco, arrived, and the fairy tale completed its circle. The reformed rapper and the healed talk show host raising a beautiful baby girl, representing everything the culture wanted to believe about what was possible when 2 wounded people did the work. It was a beautiful story. And while Jeannie was living it fully, genuinely, with her whole heart, Jeezy was already planning how it would end. The timeline is the thing that changes everything about how this story gets read. Because this is not a narrative about two people who grew apart, who tried everything, and eventually arrived at the honest conclusion that their paths had diverged. That story, as painful as it is, carries a certain dignity. Both people in it are present for the ending. Both people know it is coming. The grief is mutual even when the decision is not. This is not that story. In June of the year their divorce became public, Jeezy had already notarized the divorce papers. Not filed them, notarized them, signed them, made them legally official in the most preliminary and administrative way. 3 months before Jeannie knew anything was wrong. 3 months during which she continued to be his wife in every visible way, promoting his book, celebrating his professional milestones, sharing in the public face of a marriage she believed was still intact. She was in Vietnam with him that summer, a trip she described afterward as deeply spiritual. One of those shared experiences that bonds people and creates the kind of intimacy that is supposed to sustain a long-term relationship. She was introducing him to her cultural roots, sharing something of herself that required vulnerability and trust. She was present, invested, and loving. And he had already decided. He posted a Mother's Day tribute to her, warm, specific, calling her the glue that held their family together. After the papers had been prepared, he smiled in family photos. He appeared at events as her husband. He let her love him out loud, publicly, on platforms that would later be examined and archived, while privately he had already removed himself from the marriage in every way that mattered. When the filing became public, it was a local Atlanta newspaper that broke the story before any celebrity outlet. That detail matters because it tells you how quietly and carefully it was handled. There was no coordinated announcement, no prepared statement ready to go, no publicist managing the moment. There was paperwork filed with the court, the way any ordinary person files paperwork. And then the information made its way into the world through the channels that legal filings eventually reach. Jeannie found out from her team before she heard it from him. She was in the middle of a production meeting when her phone lit up with the news. The man who had called himself her equal, her safe space, her partner in healing, did not call her, did not sit across from her and have the conversation that 4 years of marriage and a daughter they shared together should have required. He filed, and she found out from a headline. The people around her say she was stunned, not even fully feeling it at first. Just sitting there with her phone, reading words that did not compute against the reality she had been living inside 24 hours earlier. And then, gradually, as the numbness gave way to understanding, the shape of what had actually happened became clear. He had let her look foolish. He had let her defend him, celebrate him, show up for him in every public and private way while he prepared to disappear. He had allowed their last shared experiences to be built on a foundation he had already decided to demolish. Every moment of the previous 3 months that had felt like intimacy was now overlaid with the knowledge of what he knew that she did not. That is not heartbreak in the conventional sense. That is humiliation, and it is the specific wound that Jeannie has been processing ever since. The difference between a marriage ending and a person choosing to let you live inside a lie until it was convenient for them to reveal it. The humiliation was compounded by what followed. Because Jeezy had a brand to protect, not just his personal reputation, but the specific version of himself he had spent years building. The evolved man, the reflective artist, the former street figure who had done the internal work and come out the other side with wisdom, faith, and a genuine capacity for depth. That brand was worth something. It had been built carefully, sustained through interviews and book deals and public appearances that positioned him as someone who had transcended his origins. Jeannie was central to that brand. She was, in many ways, its most compelling piece of evidence. Because what is a reformed man without the woman who bears witness to his transformation? What is healing without a partner who can testify to what she experienced in its presence? Jeannie, with her platform and her credibility and her public identity as someone who had been through real pain and come out the other side authentic, gave Jeezy's reformation story a validity it could not have achieved through his own account alone. She was his proof. And when he walked away from the marriage, he was not just walking away from her. He was walking away from the most credible endorsement of the version of himself he had spent years constructing. Which meant the exit had to be managed carefully. It had to be framed in a way that preserved the brand, even as it dissolved the relationship. The statement his team released described a heavy-hearted decision made with love and respect. It was warm and dignified and said absolutely nothing. It gave the public no purchase on what had actually happened. It was a document designed to prevent further questioning rather than provide genuine information. And it worked. For a few days, before the details of the timeline started emerging, and the framing started looking increasingly incongruous with the facts. Then came the interview. Jeezy sat across from a host, composed and almost saint-like in his bearing, and said something that functioned as either the most unconscious self-revelation of his public life or the most calculated single statement he had ever made. He said that as he sat there, he could not honestly tell the world that he had ever experienced love. The internet froze, because this was the same man who had called Jeannie his soulmate, who had talked about walking in the footprints God left alongside her, who had built a public persona around the idea that this relationship had taught him what love truly meant. And now, in the calm and polished setting of a television interview, he was rewriting the entire narrative, erasing her not through criticism or confrontation, but through the most complete possible dismissal, the suggestion that what she had given him did not rise to the level of an experience worth acknowledging. For Jeannie, hearing those words was not just painful, it was revealing, because it told her, with more clarity than anything else he had said or done, what the marriage had actually meant to him. She had been a chapter in his growth story, a vehicle for his rebrand, the woman whose love and trust and sacrifice gave him the material he needed to present himself to the world as someone who had evolved beyond his past. She was his narrative device. And now that the narrative had moved on, so had he. The social media presence he maintained throughout all of this was curated to project a specific combination of peace, forward motion, and elevated perspective. Quotes about focus and purpose, black and white photos, studio sessions captioned with lines about truth, not needing noise. The entire aesthetic of a man who has made a difficult decision and is moving through its consequences with the quiet dignity of someone who has done the work. His cryptic comment about focusing on who he was becoming and letting go of who was not coming with him was the most visible of these signals, and the one that revealed the most about the framework through which he was processing the situation. It positioned Jeannie as someone he had outgrown, a weight he had to shed in order to continue evolving. Not a person he had betrayed through months of calculated silence, but a stage of his journey that had served its purpose and been released. What he was doing, and what people eventually started to see clearly, was gaslighting on a public scale, dressing his absence of accountability in the language of self-awareness, making his self-protection sound like self-knowledge, and doing it calmly, consistently, in formats that rewarded him with admiration for what were, underneath the polished presentation, acts of emotional cowardice dressed in philosophy. Jeannie saw it. And when she finally started responding, not loudly, not by name, but in the specific register of a woman reclaiming her own story, the shift was immediate. Her posts changed tone. The healing captions gave way to something sharper. Quotes about people who study you to learn how to hurt you, about love that lacks respect being performance rather than connection, about the specific damage done by someone who lets you love them out loud while privately planning to leave. Each post was technically deniable as being about him specifically. None of them were about anything else. And then she said, in an interview that was shared millions of times across every platform, "You cannot build forever with someone who only sees you as a reflection of their image. You start thinking it is love, but really, it is a spotlight." That line became the sentence that defined the entire story, because it named exactly what had happened to her in terms that were precise without being operatic. She had been a spotlight for his performance of transformation, and once she understood that, the grief stopped being about losing a husband and started being about reclaiming the self she had modified and compressed and offered up in service of his story. Jeezy's fury operates on two levels simultaneously, and both are worth understanding clearly. The first is ego. He ended the marriage. He made the choice. He is the one who gets to own the ending on his own terms, which should mean, and which he appears to have genuinely expected to mean, that the post-divorce narrative also belongs to him, the evolved man who outgrew the relationship, the philosopher who had to release what no longer served his growth, a story in which he is the protagonist of his own healing, and Jeannie is, at most, a supporting character who was part of a chapter he has now completed. What he did not account for was Jeannie's glow-up, the TikTok post in which she describes living in the most fulfilling love story she has ever known. The alleged relationship with Anderson .Paak, the reported pregnancy, the specific and visible happiness of a woman who was supposed to be quietly recovering from the decision he made, not announcing to the world that the chapter after him is the best chapter of her life. That is the thing about the kind of ego that constructs a narrative around its own centrality. It cannot accommodate a reality in which the person it dismissed has moved past it entirely. The framework requires Jeannie to be diminished by his departure. Uncertain, still processing, still living in the shadow of what he ended. Her happiness is not just inconvenient to that framework, it is a direct challenge to it. It says, publicly and visibly, and in the most personal possible terms, that what he walked away from was not the weight he told himself it was. The second dimension of his fury is the one that has the most direct consequence for a 2-year-old girl who did not make any of the decisions that produced her current situation. Because Jeezy did not just leave Jeannie, he is her co-parent. Monaco is their daughter. And the custody situation, the threats, the court filings, the public statements about not trusting Jeannie with his child now that she wants to start a new family, exists in the specific intersection of ego and genuine complication that high-conflict divorces create for the children caught inside them. The domestic violence allegations that Jeannie filed during the divorce proceedings have never been definitively adjudicated in the public record. 4 separate incidents across the marriage. Specific dates, locations, physical descriptions of injuries, a hemorrhage, a staircase, a torn dress, a loaded rifle accessible to their toddler. Jeezy denied all of it and called the allegations a malicious attempt to tarnish his character. But those allegations exist in the legal record. They are part of the established history of this marriage and this divorce. And any court examining a custody modification request is going to be required to weigh that record against whatever he is now claiming as his basis for seeking to change the arrangement. The specific framing of his custody concerns tells you everything about the strategic position underneath them. He says he does not trust Jeannie with Monaco now that she wants to start a new family, that he will not let his daughter be around another man. This framing inverts the actual documented concerns in the case in a way that is either oblivious or deliberate. The record does not raise questions about Jeannie's fitness as a mother. The record raises questions about Jeezy's behavior inside the home they shared. His current custody posture asks the court to focus on Jeannie's new relationship rather than on his own documented history, which is a strategic position, regardless of whether it reflects any genuine concern for Monaco. And the timing cannot be explained away. He did not become vocal about custody when Jeannie was struggling through the immediate aftermath of his divorce filing. He did not become a custody activist when she sued him for the $4,000 in unpaid childcare and tuition that he allegedly owed. He did not find his voice on the subject of Monaco's welfare when Jeannie was raising their daughter day to day, while he was apparently behind on the $500,000 education account he had agreed to fund. He became loud about custody the moment Jeannie announced she was in love and allegedly pregnant. That is not parental concern, that is ego. And using Monaco as the instrument of that ego is the part of this that should concern anyone paying attention to what is actually happening to the child in the middle of it. Underneath all of the specific drama of this divorce and its aftermath, there is a broader story that Jeannie has become, somewhat unexpectedly, the center of. It is the story of what happens to women who change themselves for a man's healing narrative and then have to reckon with what that change cost them when the relationship ends. Jeannie was not a naive person when she met Jeezy. She was a woman in her late 30s with a public platform, a documented personal history, and a stated and consistent set of boundaries that had been built through genuine experience of their necessity. She was not swept off her feet by someone she could not see clearly. She chose him with her eyes open in the full light of who both of them were. And she changed fundamental things about herself. Her position on marriage, her position on motherhood, and the specific belief that this relationship was worth those changes. When the relationship ended on his timeline without her knowledge, the question she was left with was not simply the grief question that ends most relationships. It was an accounting question. What did she trade, and for what? What version of herself was modified or compressed or offered up in service of a marriage that was already being dissolved before she knew to protect it? The line she eventually said publicly, "You cannot build forever with someone who only sees you as a reflection of their image," is the answer to that accounting question. She was not building forever with Jeezy. She was building his image. And the specific cost of that is something she has had to reckon with not just emotionally, but practically. As someone who changed her most fundamental life positions based on a version of him that appears to have been, at least in part, performance. That reckoning is visible in how she has moved since the divorce. Not with bitterness. Bitterness would suggest she is still operating in relation to him, still defining herself by his presence or absence in her life. With clarity. The specific, hard-won clarity of a woman who has examined what happened without the distorting lens of hoping it meant something different than it did. Her captions, her interviews, her posts about love without respect being performance. They are not shots fired at Jeezy. They are the articulation of what she learned. And the people who have resonated with those words are resonating not because they are interested in her divorce specifically, but because the pattern she is describing is one they recognize from their own lives. Women who gave up their no because someone's healing story was compelling. Women who recalibrated their own needs around a man's transformation. Women who were present and invested in a relationship while the other person was already mentally somewhere else, building the exit. Jeannie's story became a mirror for all of those women, which is why it traveled the way it did. Not as celebrity gossip, but as something more personal and more universal. And the Anderson .Paak chapter is where the story currently lives, and it has its own complications that Jeannie is navigating simultaneously with everything else. His divorce from his wife Jalen was filed last year. The reported pregnancy creates pending legal and financial complexity in those proceedings, and Jeannie is managing all of that while also managing Jeezy's custody escalation. 3 households now connected through a series of choices made by adults who did not appear to fully map the consequences before making them. But Jeannie's navigation of it reads differently than it would have read 2 years ago, because she is not protecting someone else's image anymore. She is not compressing herself to fit a narrative that someone else is writing. She is managing a genuinely complicated situation in the way a woman manages a complicated situation when she has stopped outsourcing her sense of self to the relationship she is inside. The TikTok post, "One day you think you will never find love again, next day you are in the most fulfilling love story you have ever known," is the document of that shift more than any interview or caption she has produced, because it is not measured or careful or strategically positioned. It is the thing you say when you are actually feeling it, when the happiness is real enough that the consideration of how it will land comes second to the need to express it. It is Jeannie speaking from inside her own life rather than from the managed perimeter of it. And that is precisely what Jeezy is furious about. Not Anderson .Paak specifically. Not even the alleged pregnancy, though that is what triggered the custody escalation. He is furious about the authenticity of her happiness, about the fact that the woman he dismissed is not performing recovery. She is actually recovered, that she is not diminished by what he did to her, that the life she is building is not a smaller, sadder version of what she had before, but something she is genuinely describing as better. A man who needs to be the protagonist of his own evolution cannot accommodate a woman who evolved past him. The legal proceedings around Monaco will produce outcomes determined by evidence, testimony, and the documented record of both parents' behavior. Jeezy's attorneys will make their arguments. Jeannie's attorneys will make theirs. What the court examines will include the domestic violence allegations, the documented failure to fund Monaco's education account, and the specific framing of Jeezy's current concerns, and whether they are supported by evidence of actual risk to Monaco or by evidence of a father who activated custody machinery in response to his ex-wife's new relationship. Jeezy's brand as the evolved man has been genuinely damaged by the timeline. Not catastrophically, not irreparably, but in the specific way that damage occurs when a public persona is shown to be inconsistent with private behavior. The calm interviews and the growth quotes and the "I have never experienced love" statement all land differently now than they would have without the context of what the timeline revealed. Jeannie is rebuilding in the open. That is the most significant choice she has made in this entire story. To do her rebuilding publicly rather than retreating into the kind of private recovery that would have been safer, but would also have meant ceding the narrative entirely to Jeezy's framing. By staying visible, by posting through the pain and the anger and the clarity, and eventually the joy, she has maintained ownership of her own story in a way that makes it harder for his version to become the definitive one. She said, "Love without respect is not love. It is performance." And she is done performing. That line is not a tidy ending because real life does not produce those, but it is a real one. A woman who changed her most fundamental self-definitions for someone who did not extend her the most fundamental courtesy of honesty, who absorbed that betrayal and processed it and came out of it knowing something she did not know before, who is now apparently building the thing she described on TikTok, the most fulfilling love story she has ever known, while her ex-husband uses custody filings to process his fury at her for having the audacity to do exactly that. The fury is secret only in the sense that Jeezy has not called it that. It is visible in the timing of the custody push. It is visible in the framing of his concerns. It is visible in the specific quality of a man who cannot let go of something he chose to release. He is furious because she is fine. He is furious because the story he told about why he had to leave requires her to be diminished, and she refused. He is furious because the evolved man cannot evolve past the woman who evolved past him. And Monaco, 2 years old and innocent of all of it, is caught in the middle of a war she did not start and cannot end, waiting for the adults in her life to decide her well-being matters more than their pride. That is where this story currently lives. In the gap between what the adults owe each other and what they owe the child. In the space between Jeezy's fury and the peace he keeps performing. In the distance between the love story Jeannie is building and the one she gave up everything to try to save. This is not a celebrity divorce. This is a precise and fully documented case study in what happens when one person in a relationship is performing transformation while the other person is genuinely living it. When the image of healing gets mistaken for healing itself. When a man uses a woman's capacity for love as a narrative resource and then is surprised to discover that resource has a self-respect attached to it that he did not account for in his planning. Jeezy is secretly furious about Jeannie Mai's new life because that new life is the most complete possible refutation of the story he told about why he had to leave. She was not the problem. She was not the weight. She was not the person holding him back from his growth. She was the person who grew and kept growing while he was busy managing the optics of having left her. He left. She got free. And that is the thing he cannot forgive her for. She taught him what love costs. He is still paying for it in the only currency he has left. Anger disguised as concern and performance disguised as growth. And the truth, which does not need validation or noise, keeps finding its microphone regardless. Do you think Jeezy's custody push is genuine parental concern or something else entirely? And does Jeannie's alleged pregnancy with Anderson .Paak change the legal and emotional landscape of this situation in ways that are going to make everything more complicated before it gets simpler? Drop your honest, full take in the comments. This story deserves the conversation it has not fully had yet. If this kind of deep, full picture breakdown is what brings you here, hit that like and subscribe. We go further than the headline every time.